Welcome to the DPost Sports Chat. I'm sports editor Drew Rubenstein, and with me today is Ed Owens, our college football beat reporter. And Ed, the Big 12 preseason media poll recently came out, and WVU actually finds itself in a position it hasn't been in over a decade. They're predicted 8th out of 10 Big 12 teams. The last time they were so low in a preseason conference poll was 2002 when they were 6th. And at that time, you had the Big East with 8 teams, and Virginia Tech and Miami were still there and making their runs. Let's just start there with where they are in the Big 12 poll. Is this surprising, or is this where ultimately most people thought they'd be?
I don't think it's really all that surprising. I do think it's just right about where WVU should be ranked. I think people are looking at a lot of different things when they voted them where they did. I think they were looking at the Pinstripe Bowl, the way they ended last season. I think they took into account the 5-game losing streak. I think most of all they took into account the talent that West Virginia lost with Geno Smith, with Tavon Austin, with Stedman Bailey, all going in the first 3 rounds of the draft. I think people are wondering how Dana Holgorsen can reload this offense and get them back to even close to the level that they were at last year.
So maybe even more than talent that's not good, it's just more unknown talent. Is that more a fair assessment of WVU at this point? It's not like they have a bunch of guys who have failed. It's just there's a bunch of question marks that you just don't know. You've never seen these guys.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way to put it. No one's had the chance to prove themselves, really. With just a few exceptions, no one's gotten the playing time, no one's gotten the reps. And one thing Dana drills time and time again is that it takes time in this offense. It takes people time to get comfortable and really be able to produce the way those guys did. And you saw it even last year. The guys like Geno and Stedman and Tavon, they had amazing years. They had good years in year one with Dana, but they had great years last year. I think it's something where they just kind of need to get their feet under them. That's not saying they can't do it, but there are a lot of unknowns.
There are a lot of unknowns, and it's not a position that WVU historically has never found itself in before. You recently had a column where you mentioned that of all the college football teams, WVU is one that seems to really relish that underdog role. They're going to find themselves again here this season. So I guess the obvious question is, can they reproduce that magic that they've had in past seasons?
They do love the underdog role. It's something that they've thrived on in the past, and I think they've even tried to paint themselves as underdogs in years when they weren't, just to kind of give themselves that edge and kind of make it the us against the world mentality. And they've done it before. We've talked about it. 2002 they did it when they were ranked 6th. They came back and finished 2nd in the conference that year behind Miami. They did it in 2005. They've done it in 1993. There's a number of years where people have not expected much out of this team, and they've turned a lot of heads. They've opened some eyes and surprised a lot of people.
And going along there, it's been every year since 2002 that they have gone to a bowl game. But you've been with the paper now. This is your 4th football season, I guess. Do you remember a season that would compare in terms of just the amount of question marks and the unknowns that we were getting into earlier? Does this compare to any past seasons?
In the last 4 years, no. I think every year there's been a lot of stability. There's been a lot of carryover from the year before. Maybe last year I would have said only because of the uncertainty of going into the Big 12, but even then they were picked 2nd in the conference. So heading into this year, I think you're facing a lot more question marks than they ever have in the past.
Yeah, I think the one year that I would compare it to, and it was actually something that we discussed a couple times, and you wrote a column on it, was 2005, and I think of any year, at least in recent memory, that's the one that pops into my head, just because going into that season, they didn't know who the starting quarterback was going to be. They didn't know who the running back was going to be. At that time, Adam Bednarik ended up beating out Pat White to start as quarterback for a few games. Steve Slayton was kind of an afterthought to Jason Gwaltney at the time, so it took a while, and then obviously that season ended up progressing to the point where they went to the Sugar Bowl. So we'll see if they're able to recreate that magic. Ed, thanks for joining us today, and please continue to check our daily newspaper, The Dominion Post, for all the latest on the Mountaineers. Thanks for joining us.